Peter B. Collins, News and Comment. It's Friday, the 13th of December, 2019. And it is a dark day in the United States, as well as the United Kingdom, as we will discuss. First, a programming alert. Your humble host needs a break for mental health. And the mountains are calling. There's fresh powder in the Sierra, and I'm taking Monday off to go explore it. So it wasn't a surprise. There was a little bit of, dislocation late on Thursday night as the House Judiciary Committee adjourned without conducting the vote on the two articles of impeachment, what I was calling impeachment-lite. And then I learned that Trump calls it impeachment-lite, so I don't know if I'll continue with that little phrase. But Jerry Nadler lectured the committee members, both Republican and Democrat, saying that they should search their souls. And it was pretty clear the Democrats didn't want to take a vote late at night because the scurrilous misrepresentations by the Republican cultists who have challenged this impeachment in the most underhanded ways, it would just give them another complaint, about the secret hearings in the skiff in the basement, the unfair process because Trump can't face his accusers. It's just more bullshit, and the Democrats decided not to feed them another line. So I did not get up early enough this morning here on the left coast to witness the 10-minute vote. But it was totally on partisan lines, 23-17, as both articles of impeachment were passed out of the House Judiciary Committee. This moves to the Rules Committee on Tuesday, setting up the stage for a vote by the full House on both articles on Wednesday next week. So I am incredibly sad. I knew what the outcome was going to be. And I knew that the cultist Republicans, as I've taken to labeling them, are totally in the tank for Trump. And there does appear to be absolutely nothing that could separate them from their brilliant leader. And, I'm not ready to be treated for clinical depression. But I raise my own sadness because I imagine that you feel the same way, or that many of you do. And it's not just of this political moment and the hyper-partisanship. It's what it portends. And I believe we are leading to a breakdown of our system. And that the Republic Trumps, that's really what they are. Trump owns that party, lock, stock, and barrel. He's got most of the male members of the Republican Party by the balls. And LBJ had an old phrase, I think it was on a plaque in his office. When you have a man by the balls, his heart and mind will surely follow. Many of these Republicans freely align themselves with this corrupt con man. And there literally is nothing that you could say, that you could prove, of all of the policy failures, the brazen conflicts of interest, and the outright law-breaking that this president and his minions have visited on the American system. And I don't believe that it can sustain much more. We are headed toward a dictatorship. And we have a group of people, including the 80 or 90 or 95% of Republicans, who blindly follow this man. And they are the real source of my despair. Because there are so many idiots, so many dumb fucks, who have no standard. It's political expediency. It's driven by the Fox News mantra that government doesn't work, that liberals are dangerous and defective, that they want to put socialism and Sharia law into effect in the United States. The truth is a real victim here. And in the Hall of Mirrors of Washington these days, Trump uses Twitter to mount an alternate reality that too many people find acceptable. And I thought of the word credulous to describe the way these Republicans have defended their man, the emperor with zero clothing. Credulous means ready to believe, especially on slight or uncertain evidence. Willing to believe or trust too readily, especially without proper or adequate evidence. Gullible. People who are credulous are always ready to believe what other people tell them and are easily deceived. The credulousness is countered or augmented, I guess, by the sense of impunity that they feel. They look at the polls, they talk to their base voters, and it's a feedback loop that encourages and enables the extreme behavior that we saw from Jim Jordan, from Doug Collins, from Matt Gaetz. These are thugs, intellectual thugs, who will say anything, do anything to advance their worldview. It's a corporatist worldview. It's a conservative, dangerously conservative worldview. And we've already seen the wreckage created by this, and it will only get worse. And that they could mount their defense of Trump, claim he didn't do anything wrong, there's no crime underlying this impeachment resolution package. And they never acknowledge that he has stonewalled. They claim there isn't enough evidence, but don't allow those who have the evidence and the testimony to come forward. Now, I've been equally critical of the Democrats for rushing this two-part package when there are dozens of crimes they could choose from. I don't think they have managed this well. And Pelosi's goal has always been to keep it narrow, to make it happen quickly, knowing that it won't prevail in the Senate, trying to minimize the damage to Democrats while maximizing the damage to Republicans. And in trying to protect vulnerable members of the House, at re-election time next November, they have shortchanged the nation. And my argument is that even if these conservatives who got elected in Trump districts last November, 2018, if they stand on principle, I believe most of them will be reelected. But by running away from it, by trying to package this and get it over with as fast as possible, I believe they've squandered the opportunity to show real leadership and to lead voters, particularly independent voters, away from the Trump madness. So what is clear now is that Trump is on his way to being impeached. There do appear to be enough votes among the Democrats for a pure party line vote in the House next week. There'll be some people allowed to defect by Pelosi. And she claims that there's no whip out. They can all vote however they want. But Maxine Waters got whipped into submission. You know she wanted to include more articles of impeachment. She was one of the early voices calling for his impeachment. Al Green, the congressman from Texas, one of the early voices calling for impeachment. He can't be happy with this watered-down package. And as I pointed out, the idea that you can protect these vulnerable Democrats Trump tweeted over 150 times yesterday. And he goes into a tweet storm with the kind of racism that he embraced in the 2018 midterms. He will go low, and he will knock some of these people out. So I just think it's a bad bet followed by a bad backing bet. And we know that the Republicans will remain united. One of the most disgusting developments today is hearing Mitch McConnell and Trump both talk about how they're openly scheming to rig the trial in the Senate. And they're confidently predicting that there will not be the votes to remove him from office. So we really are facing a major downward spiral in how our system operates and the confidence that people can have in it. And if the Democrats put up Joe Biden next November, it's a cakewalk for Trump. And the insiders and the money people, they're going to do their level best to prevent a progressive, either Warren or Sanders, from getting the nomination. And I couldn't believe this. You know, the other day when the articles were unveiled, that was last week, Trump held a White House meeting with Sergei Kislyak, the Russian foreign minister. He doesn't care about the optics. And today, Rudy Giuliani was spotted arriving at the White House this morning, not long before the impeachment vote on Capitol Hill. These people feel they are bulletproof. And counting the votes, we see that there's one Democrat who so far has announced he will not vote for impeachment. That's Jeff Van Drew of New Jersey. There are 0 Republicans so far who have told reporters they'll vote for impeachment. And the one independent is Justin Amash, who left the Republican Party a few months ago. He's a former Republican from Michigan. And when we hold our noses, I had the TV on during breakfast this morning, and Trump came on. He had the president of Uruguay or Paraguay, I don't remember which one. The poor guy had to sit there and listen to Trump blather on. And one of the things Trump said was, well, I'm not happy. This is a very sad thing for our country, this impeachment vote, but it seems to be very good for me politically. My poll numbers, as you know, have gone through the roof, he said. Fundraising for the Republican Party has gone through the roof. I mean, there are a bunch of damaged roofs there in Washington, D.C. And Philip Bump over at the Washington Post took the president's comments and noted that when you look at when the impeachment inquiry was announced in late September, his approval was at 44.9%. Right now, it's at 43.9%. Now, that's really flat, okay? 1 point in a poll like this is within the margin of error. But it's not going up, and it's not going through the roof. His net approval, which is his approval minus his disapproval, was at minus 7.4 in late September, and it's now at minus 9.6. So that's down more than 2 points. And the only places where Trump is improving his numbers are in some of the individual states where it's very early to say that polls really can be projected to the outcome of a caucus or a primary election. So Trump just creates his own version of reality. He is the showman who manages to pull that off, and there are enough people who are either mesmerized or addicted to his idiocy. I should say mesmerized by. I missed the preposition there. And the challenge here in political science terms is that Democrats are trying to impeach a relatively unpopular president who is extraordinarily popular among his base. And because Republicans, though less numerous than Democrats, they turn out at a higher percentage, The Democrats have a real challenge, and it's why I argue that the old dogs like Joe Biden, the moderates like Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg, they will not excite enough voters to get the Democratic turnout up to the level it needs to be to even come close to beating Trump. But many people will take the British election, which we'll get to in a moment, and try to project that onto the United States, pressing for a corporate Democrat to be the standard bearer next year. So I mentioned the open collusion between Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Senate, which is going to be presiding over a trial. And he's not at all neutral. And to be fair, there are many Democrats who've already said they would vote to impeach just based on what they've seen before a trial even begins. That's a borderline problem. But when McConnell and Trump both say, oh, yeah, we're talking about how we're going to do this, and Trump basically says, I'll do whatever I want, a short trial or a long trial. And so the fix is in. And sure, we knew this coming into it. We knew this was a high probability. But the idea that all Republicans will remain in lockstep and sell our system down the river, down the drain, I take a personal offense at this. My old buddy Steve Pizzo, he's a retired journalist, kind of a cranky guy. He wrote the book Inside Job with co-authors exposing the savings and loan scandal of the 1980s. I don't know Steve's actual age, but he's in his late 70s, maybe even has hit 80, I'm not sure. And he put up a post today, I've linked to it in the show file for this podcast, where he talks about his own, ravings about Trump and looking for the pivot point. You know, he couldn't survive the Mueller report, right? So then the impeachment comes. And he is on the verge of despair. He says, I can no longer find solace in late-night takedowns of Trump and his deranged supporters in Congress and the U.S. hinterlands. I listen now to the latest revelations of his crimes and misdemeanors the same way I listen to Muzak in elevators. It's just background noise to me now. Because it's finally come home to me that the America I grew up in from 1945 to around 2000 no longer exists. No longer can I count on the U.S. Supreme Court to do the right thing when other branches of government have decided that it's more politically popular to follow a populist and poisonous Pied Piper rather than the Constitution. Extra points for alliteration there, Steve. I continue. No longer can I count on regulatory agencies like the EPA, the SEC, and down the line to rein in corporate avarice and crimes. Even as climate change begins ravishing communities and countries around the globe, carbon emissions each year go on to break new record highs. We progressives and liberals cling to the notion that what our founders created and generations have perfected and died for represented some immutable force which, if knocked down, has built-in tools needed to rise anew. Clearly, that's not so. Clearly, we as a nation have embarked on a new path, one far more familiar to folks living in Russia, China, or other anti-democratic regimes. And it's not just happening here, but around the globe. And so, I'm not trying to spread despair and depression, but I do think this Friday the 13th finds us in a very, very dark place. And the news from Britain, while I never expected Jeremy Corbyn to win, the fix was in against the Labour Party, the smears on him, and I find him to be a less than inspiring leader. And I was frustrated all through the Theresa May Prime Minister period that the Labour Party never really took a position about Brexit. They danced around it. They feared that because the vote was just more than 50% to leave the European Union, that they had to straddle. But I never expected Boris Johnson, who's as much of an oaf and an idiot as Trump, to sweep in with a majority larger than Margaret Thatcher's in 1987. He picked up 74 seats. That's the majority that the Tories, the Conservatives, now have in the House of Commons. And based on the analysis I've heard, and it's limited, indications are that voters simply voted for Johnson because he would move forward on Brexit, and Corbyn, among other things, was calling for a second referendum vote on the Brexit proposal. And I actually thought from here that that's an intelligent approach. There's been a deadlock for almost 3 years. The original vote was narrowly approved. I was told by my British friends that it was advisory. It was not binding. But it was treated that way, clearly. And there are a lot of moving parts to, number one, finalizing the exit from the European Union, and then turning around to negotiate a trade agreement with those same people. And one analyst or expert was on TV last night saying the last country that joined the European Union, it took 7 years to negotiate the terms. And so the pendulum could swing very quickly. I don't think that support for Boris Johnson is terribly deep. But the Liberals, the Liberal Democrats, and the Labour Party both suffered massive losses. And Britain seems to be moving in the same dire direction as the United States. Some good analysis from Alan McLeod at MintPress News about the Labour Party's rout. And the Labour Party itself has been split. There's no question about that. Jeremy Corbyn did not command the entire membership of his party. But the Tony Blair corporate labor types, they pollute the Labour Party in Britain, from my point of view, as much as the corporate Democrats do here in the United States in their respective ways. Interestingly, turnout was about 67%. And we have seen turnout up into the 70s in Britain in the past. And we do have to remember the anti-Semitic smears and many other just manufactured lies that were promoted about Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party during this recent election that concluded yesterday. Every day I pause for a second to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. People like Carl Howard, always the first to click when a podcast gets posted. There's Jerry in Southeast Portland, Siri, the artist in Northern California, and Michael Meadows just created a new annual subscription. I thank him for his support, and I want to thank each and every one of you who contributes to the overhead here at peterbcollins.com. And if you're not a subscriber, let's fix that. Maybe you want to make it a holiday gift. I'll take it. Visit peterbcollins.com, click on menu, click on Become a Subscriber. When you hit the sign-up page, it's easy to make a choice that's comfortable for your budget. So the circus ringmaster, seeing that the impeachment vote was going to go against him, well, he announced just about the time, minutes after the vote had occurred, that we have reached a deal with China, what he's calling phase one of trade agreements that will cause Trump to roll back the onerous tariffs that he has imposed willy-nilly. And he's going to delay or cancel $160 billion of tariffs that were scheduled to go into effect on Sunday. I remain skeptical and suspicious. Trump started this war with China, and he appears willing to use it for domestic political purposes, and so we cannot be sure that there is a firm deal, either on the part of the U.S. or on the part of China. And even if China has said they've agreed to a deal, well, past experience shows that they often wiggle out of them in ways that stymie American interests. Iran is reporting a very big cyber attack this week. Quote, "We faced a very well-coordinated state-sponsored cyber attack on the government's digital infrastructure." That's according to one of the top cybersecurity experts in Iran. Want to guess which state? Meanwhile, despite the major changes across the English Channel, Emmanuel Macron's efforts to change the pension systems in France have hit a brick wall. And the unions show no sign of bending, and Macron is trying to modify his proposals and see if he can find a way out of the showdown that he created. We are learning that Evo Morales, the ousted president of Bolivia, has moved from Mexico to Argentina, where he's been granted refugee status. And today, in an editorial in the New York Times, they try to rewrite recent history. They embrace the Organization of American States, which has tilted to support autocrats over populists like Morales. And the New York Times doesn't acknowledge that it was a coup that forced him out. They say the Bolivian military forced him out, but they don't call it a coup. And while I do agree that Morales confused people outside his country by imposing term limits and then trying to get them removed so he could stay in office, that did create, I think, some bad perceptions. But here's the Times. The flawed election on October 20th, early suspicions of fraud by the Organization of American States helped fuel the protests and provided cover for the military to suggest that Morales leave office. I'm not aware of this next line. Last week, the OAS issued an audit to which Morales had agreed, substantiating those suspicions and finding a series of malicious operations aimed at altering the will expressed at the polls. Well, I'll withhold judgment until I see evidence, and the representations of the OAS don't carry much weight with me these days. I told you yesterday about the ugly NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act. It's the Pentagon budget, and how all of the progressive language was stripped out in negotiations that were conducted by Jared Kushner, the Crown Prince, over at the White House. And he insisted on all the language related to stopping weapons sales to Saudi Arabia and other ways of staying out of the war in Yemen, as well as trying to put limits on Trump's ability to declare war on Iran. All that stuff was removed. But the final version of the bill retained language requiring that the Director of National Intelligence present a formal determination within 30 days on who was responsible for the assassination of Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in October a year ago. And this means that bloody Gina Haspel may be tasked by the acting DNI within the next 30 days to make a declaration about Khashoggi's responsibility for the assassination and dismemberment of Khashoggi. Yesterday, trying to show that they can impeach and do other things, and also trying to do some agenda setting, Nancy Pelosi led the House to a party line vote approving a plan that's going absolutely nowhere. And I embrace some of the elements of it. It allows the government to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies before Medicare buys those drugs. But this bill is dead on arrival in the Senate, and it has had the effect of dividing the progressive and corporate wings of the Democratic Party. I'm not sure it was a good idea. Another idea I'm not so sure about is hosting the next Democratic debate on a Friday night right before Christmas. That's the plan on December 20th, and they already changed the venue once. It was supposed to be at UCLA, but there's a labor issue there, so they moved over to Loyola Marymount University, a Jesuit institution, where there is a labor problem as well. A picket line was thrown up there the other day, as the food service workers at the university have been negotiating for a new agreement since last spring. So Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Andrew Yang, and Joe Biden have all said they won't cross the picket line. Will Pete Buttigieg, the former McKinsey consultant? Will Amy Klobuchar, the moderate from Minnesota? Will Tom Steyer, the billionaire who had to get people to donate to his campaign so that he could get on the debate stage? I don't know. And Tulsi Gabbard already announced before she was told that she wouldn't be invited that she would not be attending. I'm not sure why she took that position, maybe to save a little face. Meanwhile, Senator Warren has gone on the frontal attack. She criticized former Mayor Mike Bloomberg by name, and she criticized Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg without naming them in a speech in New Hampshire 2 days ago. I take it back. It was only yesterday, on Thursday. She used the speech to highlight her economic message. The key question isn't big government versus small government. It's who government works for. In a remark aimed at Biden, unlike some candidates for the nomination, I'm not counting on Republican politicians having an epiphany and suddenly supporting the kinds of tax increases on the rich or big business that they have opposed under Democratic presidents for a generation. And in a pretty interesting brief analytical piece by number cruncher Giovanni Russinello at the New York Times today, he points out that the slack numbers that Warren has seen in her polling recently, the slide this fall, are the result of being flanked on both the left and the right. To her left, Bernie Sanders is holding on to steady support from 15 to 20% of Democratic voters, most of them liberals, and former VP Biden and Pete Buttigieg have been snatching supporters from Warren across the ideological spectrum, but mostly from the conservative wings of the Democratic Party. So we'll see if she's able to rebound. And at some point, it may be wise for Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren to find a common path forward by sharing the ticket. Bernie Sanders yesterday endorsed Cenk Uygur. You know him from the Young Turks? And I have a generally positive impression of Cenk. He has thrown his hat into the ring to run for Congress in the district that was vacated by Katie Hill after her outing as a lesbian who had, I guess she's bisexual, and claims that she had had inappropriate sexual relations. Well, it turns out that the Young Turk has a history of sexist comments. He is described by some critics as a misogynist, and some of the quotes are cringeworthy. He once wrote, "Obviously, the genes of women are flawed. They are poorly designed creatures who do not want to have sex nearly as often as needed for the human race to get along peaceably and fruitfully." Now, I leave it to the voters in the district where Cenk is being challenged by moderate Democrats, by George Papadopoulos on the Republican side. I'll let those voters decide. But they're now trying to smear Bernie Sanders because he endorsed Cenk Uygur. And I don't believe that Bernie is responsible for any of those remarks that Cenk has already apologized for and tried to distance himself from. So we'll see how that sorts out. But one reason that Cenk is being targeted is that he's been a sharp critic of the Democratic Party. He was bounced from MSNBC. He had a brief run there because he would not toe the line and promote all those Democratic National Committee talking points. I think that's the real source. But I do not, just ignore the history here. It is a little troubling. A good piece at The Guardian, an op-ed by Kenneth Stern, who was the head of the American Jewish Committee's anti-Semitism team that drafted the working definition of anti-Semitism. And he writes that it was never intended to be a campus hate speech code, but that's what Trump's executive order this week has accomplished. And he says that this order is weaponizing that definition. I'm glad to see some principled Jewish Americans pushing back on this ridiculous move by Trump that will merely stifle free speech. Also, want to commend my colleagues over at whowhatwhy.org on the news of the appeal of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev's conviction in the Boston bombing case. They note that the attorneys didn't raise all of the issues that deserve to be examined. For instance, FBI records from April 2011 indicate that the older brother, Tamerlan, was willing to assist the FBI, and a senior FBI executive who had reviewed the documents suggested that Tamerlan had acted on this willingness in a phone call. Were the brothers capable of building the bombs that exploded near the finish line of the marathon? Experts said they were not, but the subject disappeared altogether. Another point, when did law enforcement first focus on the Tsarnaevs? Law enforcement were surprised that the FBI seemed to consider the brothers suspects while simultaneously announcing they had no idea who had committed the crime. And there are other issues as well. You can follow the link to whowhatwhy.org. Just another example of Trump's hypocrisy. I've been very neutral about Greta Thunberg, the teenage Swedish climate activist. For people who respond to her message, I have no problem. But I don't personally promote her as a spokesperson for the people who want to address climate change. I do fear that she is in some ways being manipulated. But that's just my opinion. Where I defend her with every ounce is that Trump has been trash tweeting her. She is 16 years old. And she told a reporter the other day, I have Asperger's, and that means I'm sometimes a bit different from the norm. And given the right circumstances, being different is a superpower. Well, I do commend her for not wilting under Trump's mean tweets. And finally today, Clint Eastwood has proven to be a pretty good film director. He's a right-wing nut politically, but, I think some of his movies in recent years have been pretty good. Today, they are rolling out Richard Jewell. And this is the story of the man who was falsely accused of being the perpetrator of the bombing at the Olympics in Atlanta. But in the Hollywoodization of the story, which is generally considered to be fact-based, Clint Eastwood cast a character as Kathy Scruggs, the reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution who helped break the true story. And the fictionalized account in the film shows that she attempted to seduce an FBI agent in an effort to get news that she could put in her reports. And this has produced a huge backlash among journalists in Atlanta who think that this is a gratuitous assault on journalists and on this woman in particular. And so I'm not going to go see that movie this weekend, okay? Thanks for joining me today for my News and Comment podcast. You're free to share it all over the place. It's on YouTube, and I'm Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.